are about ready to geek out. I am going to provide a link to my slides and more at the end of this presentation. I'll put it in the chat window so you can download these slides because that's the number one question I often get, like, hey, can I get a copy of your slides? The answer is yes. Why? Because I love you and I want to make your job easier. So when we create a graphic for a proposal, it's a conversation between two people, and thank you very much for your patience. The two people are the author, that's the person who makes the graphic, and the reviewer, evaluator, decision maker, that's the person who learns from the graphic. There's two very different perspectives when this happens. The author is thinking, why am I sharing this? Or at least they should be. And the reviewer, evaluator, decision maker is thinking, why should I care? Ultimately, when we create a proposal graphic or any proposal, we're answering two fundamental questions that the evaluator, decision maker, or reviewer wants to know, and that is, what is our solution and why should they pick us? So graphics are a very quick way to do both of those things. We live in an at-a-glance society. People no longer request that their information be succinct and to the point. They require it. And the example I gave earlier was, imagine going to a website, not finding what you're looking for. Do you stay there for hours? No, you leave immediately. Evaluators, reviewers, decision makers, exactly the same. They're going to look at our proposal and they're looking for what's our solution and why should they pick us. So ultimately, the author should be thinking, well, why am I sharing this to answer those questions? And the reviewer's thinking, sorry, I have a cough. I had COVID. It's lingering. You know how it goes. So those two perspectives put together give us what we need to create winning at-a-glance proposal graphics. The process that we're going to use is broken into two phases, conceptualization and rendering. Conceptualization is coming up with the concept, the idea, the content, and rendering is actually turning it into a graphic itself. The way we're going to remember this is we're going to use an acronym called GASCAP, and think of it as, filling up the evaluator, reviewer, decision makers brain with content that they need to make the right decision, to choose our solution. The first one, the G, stands for goal. So ultimately, the first thing we want to figure out is, why is the author sharing this? Sometimes some of us are the author, and sometimes we're not. Ultimately, we need to know that information. The goal is a selfish goal. It is what we want to have happen after someone looks at and disseminates our graphic. What happens after? For example, in a proposal situation, do they now know the schedule for deliverables, or how our process mitigates risk, or maybe how we identify coding errors quickly, or how our solution works at a high level? Or why is our solution betterer than our competitors? Or how to save money and time? Or maybe our quality control process. So this is ultimately the goal of the graphic. So after someone looks at our graphic, what do they know? What can they do? That's the goal. So the very first thing is I need to know what the goal of the graphic is. Oftentimes, it's a little ambiguous, meaning that the author knows what they were trying to say, but the reviewer, evaluator, decision maker sorry, is confused. The next thing is we need to announce or create the action caption for what we're trying to say. This is giving the reviewer a reason to care. The announcement is essentially, at its core, a summary of what our graphic is showing. Our job is to communicate it clearly. Einstein said if we can't explain it simply, the assumption is we don't understand it well enough. So ultimately, our job is to take something that may be very complex and help the reviewer, decision maker, evaluator quickly and clearly understand what we're trying to communicate and why they should care. And there's a technique I like to use. I call it the M&M technique, and it's broken up into two parts. The first M stands for motivators. These are reasons for the evaluator to care. And then the other M stands for means. This is how the person who's reviewing it will get the motivators. So as an example, I could say, hey, do you want to make your job easier? Let's say that's my goal. My goal is I want you to use this new software. So I say, hey, do you want to make your job easier? That's a motivator to you. So now the motivator is all about the audience. So how can I help? How does my solution help them? Well, we have a new tool. So the message is make your job easier using this new tool. That's my summary. You can have up to 3 motivators. Here's why. Because ultimately, there are only 3 audience archetypes, meaning that there's only 3 types of people that will review, audit, select your proposal. It's going to be a strategic thinker. Think management, C-level. They're thinking strategically, holistically, often, not always, often. Number 2, tactical level thinkers. These are the people that have to work with our tool. These are the worker bees. These are the people that say, I have to use this. Is it going to bugger me up or is it going to be easy? The third group are people who are apathetic. They could care less. For example, in a healthcare bid or in a government bid, they may bring in outside evaluators to be more objective. They are relatively apathetic, meaning that they have no horse in the race. So if the solution isn't perfect, they don't really care. They're making judgment calls based on evaluation criteria alone. And so by breaking up our solution message, the announcement into an M&M, I'm appealing to them. I'm making it very easy for them to understand what's our solution and why should they pick us, motivator and means. That's the announcement. The next thing is I'm going to spell it out. When I say spell it out, what I mean is we're going to provide proof or evidence. So let's go back to our example. We said, hey, I'm going to make your job easier by using this new tool. Motivator, make your job easier, means. Makes sense. So what happens, remember, this is a conversation between the reviewer, evaluator, decision maker, and your graphic. It's happening automatically. So there's only 2 questions that the evaluator is going to ask if you were in a conversation with them. If I said, hey, Danica, we can make your job easier by using this new tool. The first question I'd probably ask is, what's the new tool? So the first question your graphic needs to answer is, what is the means? So for example, lower risk by using our new QC process. Okay, what's your new QC process? Quality control process. And the only other question your graphic needs to answer is, how will that means give me the motivator or motivators? So what is the means and how will that give me the motivators? We answer that in our graphic, we're good to go. I'm going to put a cough drop in my mouth. Forgive me. So then our job is to answer those 2 questions clearly and succinctly because we live in an at-a-glance society. So what is the new tool? It's right here in the ribbon. Click on it. You're done. How does it make my job easier? Because it automatically creates my reports and sends them off. Oh, okay. So that is spelling it out. So goal, announce, motivator means, and then spell it out. Provide that proof or evidence. Some of you have control over that content. Some of you don't. We need this information in order to create an effective graphic, or else all I can do is create a more aesthetically appealing, professional, compliant graphic because I don't know what the goal is, who the audience is. I don't know that announcement. So, for example, a quick trick would be to make sure that you know the action caption or title for your slide or your action caption under or above your graphic before you create the graphic. Think of it this way. If if the author doesn't know what they're trying to say clearly and succinctly, then you're in an I'll know it when I see it situation. Because the author knows intuitively at their core what they're trying to say, but they might not be able to articulate it in a way that the designer, you maybe, or you're creating it as the author and the designer, and you may be in a situation, I'll know it when I see it. That's a bad place to be. So if you know your goal, if you can write that action caption, your announcement with your M&M, and then of course spell it out, provide the proof, what is your means and how will it give me the motivators? You've got what you need to make an effective, winning, at a glance proposal graphic. So now it's time to render it. That's not a graphic yet. That's the content development. So the next thing we're going to do is chunk. The C stands for chunk. I'm going to break it up. So here's an example. Here's my proposal graphic. The goal, the author's goal, is that the client adopts our new software tool. Cool. That's what we're trying to do. The announcement is make your job easier by using this new tool. Spell it out. The new tool is called Auto Report and is a new button found in the main menu. Great. It automatically generates your project reports. Once all tracking fields are completed and project milestones are met, huzzah! The reports are automatically emailed to all project stakeholders. Great. Now that's not a graphic. By the way, there's only 3 reasons to ever have a proposal graphic. Number 1 is if the information is too complex to understand textually. For example, an org chart. Imagine trying to explain an organization chart textually. Why? Just show me an org chart. It is the most efficient way to communicate that information. Number two, it's critical success factor. If the evaluator, reviewer, or decision maker misses or misunderstands this, we lose. So therefore, it's going to be a graphic. This is a perfect example. It's critical. The third reason is a little bit soft, and that is if you want to elicit a very specific emotional response, a visual is a very, very quick way to do that. Think proposal covers. Why do you put visually appealing content on a proposal cover? Because you want to elicit a very specific emotional response. Think PowerPoint slides or Google Slides. Why do you put imagery on there? Because you want to elicit a very specific emotional response. So aesthetics elicit a very specific emotional response very, very quickly. So in this instance, it's a critical success factor. If the reviewer, decision maker, evaluator misses or misunderstands this, we lose. So then once I have chunked the information, all I'm doing is highlighting the most important bits of information. Put it on a sticky note, write it on a whiteboard, pull it out in Visio, PowerPoint. I don't care. Whatever you want, you're just highlighting the most important stuff. So that's chunk. So you're just taking the information, you're answering the what and how questions. What is the means and how will it give me the motivators as succinctly and clearly as possible. This is how you avoid overly verbose graphics. Hey, Mike, my graphics are always so heavy and lots of words. Did you follow this process? What's your goal? What's your M&M, your announcement? And did you spell it out? Did you answer what is the means and how will it give me the motivators? That's all the information that should be in that infographic, in that proposal graphic, on that PowerPoint slide. That's it. That's all that should be in there. Because remember, it's a conversation and we're living in an at-a-glance society. The last thing I want to hear, if I said to you, hey, Alex, make your job easier by using this new tool. And you said, great, Mike, what's the new tool? And I said, oh, we were founded in 1969 and we have great processes. Oh my gosh, that is not what Alex wants. Alex said, I asked you, what's your new tool? And I need to answer that succinctly and clearly. If you want to make an evaluator, decision maker, reviewer's job very hard, don't answer those 2 questions. Don't follow this process. And what you'll wind up with is a proposal graphic that's going to, if you're lucky, help you win. Most of the times they don't. All right, so the next thing is I need to take that chunk, those chunks, and assemble it to tell a story. There's an old saying, facts tell and stories sell. Ultimately, what we want to do is we want to tell a micro story that puts the customer, our client, the user, as the hero of our story. So here's that example again. We have the chunked information. We know the goal. We know the announcement. We spelled it out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of all the other information. It's not needed. I don't need it anymore because this is the most important stuff. Great. So this is what I'm left with. This is the content I'm left with. So I need to turn that into a graphic. It's not a graphic yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to assemble these chunks so that it tells a little story. So we know what the end's going to be. The end's going to be make your job easier. So if I do this, this, and this, ipso facto, your job becomes easier. So we know the end. We just have to arrange those chunks to tell that little story. So once upon a time, there was a person who filled out all the tracking fields. They clicked the auto report button and it automatically generated project reports, automatically emailed them to all project stakeholders. Huzzah! Ultimately, their job became much, much easier. So that is the way we're going. So that's assembling it. We're getting much, much closer to a graphic. The process works every time. It takes as much subjectivity out of it and puts objectivity into it. It avoids, I'll know it when I see it. So the last step in the process is oftentimes the thing that most people get hung up on because there's so many variables involved. The last step in the process is to visualize or picture that solution. So I'm going to give you a bunch of tools that you can use right now to make your job easier at rendering these graphics because we were conceptualizing, now we're rendering them. So we chunk it, assemble it, and now we picture it. So one of the first tools in your downloads, which I'm going to give you at the end of this, is a graphic cheat sheet. So the graphic cheat sheet works like this. Every single graphic that you and I will ever make in any proposal is going to align with one of the concepts down the left side. At its core, we're either communicating hierarchy, architecture or structure, process or flow, cause and effect. So at its core, you figure out what you're trying to communicate. So let's say, hey, I'm trying to communicate a relationship. So what you can do is if your information is simple, you would choose from the yellow column. If your information is more complex, the orange column. And if it's quantitative, amount, value, or time, you would choose a graphic from the blue column. So what you can do is if you're the author or you're working with an author, you can say, hey, I've got an idea. Hey, let's say I'm working with, let's say Katie. I'm working with Katie. Hey, Katie, I was thinking for your graphic for relationships, we could do a Venn diagram. And Katie says, you know what, Mike? I think that's overdone. I don't want to do that. I said, no worries, no worries. What about a puzzle graphic? And Katie says, oh my gosh, if I see another puzzle graphic, I'm going to die. So no puzzle graphic. And no worries, no worries. What about a funnel graphic? And Katie says, close, but not quite it. And I say, cool. What about a pipe graphic? And Katie says, what's a pipe graphic? Well, there's lots of ways you can do this. I'm going to show you one way is I'm going to put this into, drop this in here, is a website you can go to look these up. So if I go to this link right here, it's free. You go there and you say, all right, what's a pipe graphic? And I say, hey, Katie, this is a pipe graphic. And Katie says, not quite it. Not quite it. And I say, no worries, no worries. What about a spiral graphic? And Katie says, what's a spiral graphic? And I said, well, this isn't exactly what it looked like, but this is an example. And Katie goes, that's it. It shows all the pieces working together to give me, I love it. Just make it match our color scheme, our brand standard, or compliance, whatever we need to do, and we're good. So what just happened there? Well, Katie and I we're no longer in a know it when I see it situation in the sense that we problem solved real time. So if you're the author, you do this with yourself. If you're not the author, you could go with the author and say, here's some examples. I'm gonna give you a tool to make this even easier, but we didn't waste our money and time creating a Venn diagram and Katie vetoed it. Boy, that Katie, I'm telling you, you're veto heavy here. Puzzle didn't work for you. Funnel didn't work for you. And then pipe graphic didn't work for you. But finally, we got to this and we did that in minutes because we were able to go through the options together. Or if you're the author, you can look at them and know how you package that information visually changes your perception of the content. I'm going to say that again. How you package the information changes how it's perceived. So that is why different graphic types package information differently to tell a slightly different story. So let's go back to our example. We have our graphic cheat sheet. and we're showing processor flow. So I'm going to we'll do the road graphic right now. So what I'm going to do is we're going to show this process. So we have a road. And what I recommend is that you draw it very poorly. You want to make it look like you drew it with your foot. The reason why I say that is because, well, not all of us can hand render stuff, but we don't want aesthetic bias getting in the way, meaning that we don't want people having conversations about, is that the font you're going to use? Is that the color you're going to use? Nope, nope, nope. Is this the right concept? Is this the right content? We're not at the point where we're making pretty pictures. We're not making aesthetically professional, appealing imagery that's compliant. We're making sure that we're spinning the story and telling the story we need to tell. So what I'm doing is I'm quickly drawing something very poorly, just real basic, like a road graphic. So this is step one right here. This is step two. This is step 3, 4, and 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Boom. So this is 5 because that's the end result. Make your job easier. This is 4, 3, 2, and 1. How long did that take me? How long did that take me? That took me seconds to do. And if I'm the decision maker, I go, hey, that's going to work. If I'm not the decision maker, if I don't have veto power, I'm going to go to the author and say, hey, Danica, this is what I'm thinking. Do you agree? I don't like it. Okay, scratch it out and try something else. Or Danica says, oh, I love it. Go ahead and render it. Because rendering a graphic on the computer takes a lot longer than drawing it with your foot. The goal is to remove personal aesthetic biases from the decision because ultimately I'm not making it for Danica. I'm making it for the evaluator, decision maker, and reviewer. So right now, I want Danica to tell me, is this the right content, concept? Is this the right way to package the information? Because Danica understands it at a level that she may not have communicated to me, and she'll know intuitively whether this is probably going to work for her needs. Once we do that, we can render the graph. Now you have two choices. Well, you have a few choices. You can either build it or buy it. And if you need to have a designer to do it, if you're not a designer, you can work with your in-house designers. My company does it for a living. You can work with freelance designers. Just make sure that they're experienced. Because just because they're a designer doesn't mean they know proposals. And if any of you have ever worked with designers who are amazing, as a designer, was not a fan of proposals. There are so many variables, so many specific things to that delivery mechanism, the way we create sizes and compliance issues and things like that. You really do want somebody that's experienced. But let's assume you have to do it yourself or you're a designer. So let's go forward with that. The first thing we want to figure out is what's the style of our graphic? Here's what I recommend. Back in the day, and here's why I recommend it. Back in the day, if you could create a 3D photorealistic or skeuomorphic graphic, people said, whoa, how'd you do that? You're amazing. You were the bee's knees. Then in about 2004 came the advent of the smartphone. And if I were to take something this visually complex and put it into an 8 pixel by 8 pixel block on my phone, it would be a muddy mess. So we came up with a more simple or flat style. And then in 2016 or so, the Google said, you know what? We love the flat style, but sometimes we need a little bit of skeuomorphism. And they gave birth to the material style. The material style takes skeuomorphic elements into consideration when they're building the graphics. Why am I telling you this? Because remember, we're not creating graphics for us, we're creating it for our target audience. So if my audience is, let's say, over 45 years old, they grew up with thinking this skeuomorphic style was the bee's knees. If my audience is younger, they grew up with thinking the flat or simple style is fire. It's the best. Well, what happens if you don't know your demographic? Well, what we found is that the material style is the most appealing style in all of the continuum of styles that you can use. Here's an example. If, and this is a blanket statement, so it's not always true. If I were to show this graphic to some younger people, they might say, what's with the gumballs? Why is it so shiny? Looks like a marketing graphic, doesn't look like a proposal graphic. If I were to show this graphic to an older audience, sometimes what I hear is, can you make it pop? Or I could have made that. But if I use a material style, 3D when you need it, 2D when you don't, not a lot of graphic embellishment, keep it simple, silly, then what I find is it's the most appealing style. Now, if you have corporate brand standards that says, thou shalt not use 3D, don't use it. If you have corporate brand standards that say you have to use this particular style, use it. Just know that the material style is going to be the safest, most appealing style across all demographics. If you have to, again, you have two choices, build it or buy it. So if you have to make it yourself, if you look at this graphic, it's made up of basic shapes in PowerPoint. So we have circles for these ovals, they call it. If you look at this, this is just an arrow right here. Gosh darn this cough. This is just a cylinder or a can right here. Real basic stuff. Now, when you start getting into more complex things, this is when you have to know PowerPoint can do some pretty cool stuff. So in the Adobe Cloud ecosystem, you can do Boolean functions or merge and combine or subtract shapes. You can do the same thing in PowerPoint. So if I were to go to PowerPoint, I'm going to discard this. If I were to go to PowerPoint, you can make all kinds of things. So let's say I have, I want to create a Venn diagram. Here we go. Oops. I want to create a Venn diagram. Here we go. We have a Venn diagram. So what I can do is create both of these, go to my merge shapes tool. Once you have two or more shapes selected, merge shapes, I'm going to go ahead and do fragment, hit fragment, and now all of a sudden, all my pieces are broken apart. So now what you can do is you can build graphics from scratch. So you can say, hey, I want you to pay attention, close attention to this area right here, right in the center, because this is where all the magic happens. So you can do anything that you want that way. So you can use merge shapes to create pretty complex things. It takes time and practice to do it. Now, what happens if you can't? Well, you can buy solutions. When I say buy, I mean acquire. Here are two free solutions, Pexels.com and Pixabay.com. They're great for what's called raster imagery. Raster imagery are photographs made up of pixels. Ultimately, you really want to use vector-based imagery. Vector-based imagery is made up of math, and I'll explain the difference in a moment. So if I go to, let's see, if I go here, if I were to go to, let's go to Pexels. Here's Pexels, boom. And here's the next one is Pixabay. If you go here, you'll be able to, for free, download some pretty professional raster images and videos. So if I were to type in, let's say, business, right here, hit return, I'm going to get a bunch of imagery that is free to use that I can add to, let's say, the cover of my proposal. Let's say we're working with, a particular state or city. You can find imagery with that state or city to put on the cover. Same is true for Pixabay. Let's say we're looking for business. So these are great, again, for what's called raster images or photographs. And of course, there are AI tools. And if you want, Brenda and I can set up an AI proposal graphics session for you in the future. But you see, you can grab these. The next tool I'm going to share, here we go, is a tool that I had a hand in creating. I had no hand in creating Pexels or Pixabay, but because I couldn't find a proposal graphics tool out there, I worked with people way smarter than me to create a tool that you can download for free. I'll show you how to do it right now. So if you are in PowerPoint, if you go to PowerPoint and in your downloads, I'll also have these instructions, and you click on your Home tab in PowerPoint, Home tab, click Add-ins, and click on More Add-ins. So you click on Home, Add-ins, More Add-ins, or you can just search, but if you type in More Add-ins, they are not copyrighted. You are 100% able to use them any way you want. You never have to worry about copyright images. If you were to go to Google Images or Bing Images and download something, even if you used the filter to look for copyright free or available Unsplash is amazing as well. Even if you used the Google images here, let's go here to show you. Let's go to Google. Google. If I were to go to Google and I would type in business, hit return, and I chose images. And then in images, I have tools. And I were to go to usage rights and choose Creative Commons or commercial or other licenses. Even if I were to grab it from here, because if you didn't, you would be breaking copyright law. Even if you grabbed it from here, Google doesn't always get it right. Bing always doesn't get it right. And people get sued because, hey, at one point in time, it was commercial, but somebody acquired that company and restricted that license, and now you're using it. You don't know. So I always recommend that you go to places like Unsplash, Pexels, Pixabay, or Build a Graphic. So what I would do is I'd go to my add-ins and type in graphics. And then it's the first one, and you're going to choose add. And you add it for free to PowerPoint. So what it is this little thing over here. You click, you open it up, and it allows you to search over 10,000 and growing proposal graphics. So let's say I want to type in, say I go to the newest graphics, and you can click, let's say, let me grab one. Oh, Let's say you like this one. So you go ahead and hit insert graphic, and all the graphics are completely editable and they're vector based, meaning that you can change anything about them. You can move things around, you can recolor them, anything that you want to do. So you want to draw somebody's attention to something, you can just change it. All the graphics can be copy and pasted into Adobe Illustrator, can be brought into Google Slides, whatever you want to do. They are 100% editable and shareable in any tool. Let me show you exactly how you might use it. And by the way, you can 100% download it for free to test it out, to preview it. You cannot insert or edit graphics for free. If you do that, if you want to edit the graphics, you'll have to pay $199 a year. It's up to you. I think it's worth it, but I have a horse in that race, so you take it with a grain of salt. For those of you whose company blocks the Microsoft Store, I don't know why they do, but sometimes they do. The tool is as safe as PowerPoint because it's been vetted by Microsoft and it's only available on Microsoft Store, meaning that they only make that stuff available. But you can get a local version that does not require cloud access. It was created for what's called high side environments, or environments where there is no access to the internet, or they're ultra secure. So there is two versions. But anyway, what you can do is you have your text and it allows you to break it up and turn that text into visual representations. So what you would do is you'd simply find the graphic that you want and copy and paste your content in there, modify it any way that you need to. So let's say this wasn't your color standard, you could click on it and you could easily change it to whatever color that you want. So all the pieces are 100% editable. You can move things around, you can break things apart. It's all editable and it's all vector based. So here's a real scenario. I went to ChatGPT, and just so we would be on the same page, and I said, all right, I want you to give me 5 to 8 steps that summarizes how to create a successful proposal graphic. That's what I wanted. So this is what ChatGPT gave me. Is it right? Probably not, but it's the starting point. So this is the fun thing that you can do. And I know Cheryl kind of asked this. So what you can do is you'd say, take whatever content that you have, either from an AI engine or what your author gave you or a subject matter expert gave you. You've got that information. And now you can use Build a Graphic to test out different ways to package the information. So maybe you want to show it in this way, or maybe you want to show it without all that detail. Or maybe you want to use a different path. Or maybe you want to try it this way. So what Build a Graphic allows you to do is to try different ways of showing the information. Now, right now, I'm animating going from slide to slide. The tool doesn't animate it for you. What I'm doing is I'm showing you how you can move your content around. Because if I were to look at this, you'd have this graphic and you could move things around any way that you want. You could change colors. You could change it in any way that you deem fit. You want to change the background, it's completely up to you. So what I'm doing is I'm testing out different ways to show it without breaking a sweat. So I'm setting it up so it does it very, very quickly. If you were creating these graphics for a written document, you would make sure that the graphics are the same size they're going to be in the written document in PowerPoint. What do I mean by that? So what I would do is I would simply select all my pieces, I'd group them and scale them to the size they're going to be. So a group, and I go to shape format, and it's going to be no bigger than 6.5 inches wide, let's say 6.5. I hit return, and it shrinks it down, and I simply lower my font size to whatever I want. There we go. And I check to make sure the font is compliant. And then what I do is I would simply copy and paste it or save the image as a picture, or in the instructions for the tool, I show you how to go from PowerPoint to Word, for example, without breaking a sweat. So you would do it that way. Let's keep going. What I'm doing right now is I'm showing you the same content, but when I put it in a different graphic type, it changes the perception of the content. It changes the way we spin or tell the story. Notice how when I place the same content into different graphic types, your perception of the content and the narrative changes automatically because we live in an at-a-glance society. So notice as I change this, how our perception is changing. It's changing how we're packaging the information. It can significantly change the likelihood of success because we're packaging it in a way that it spins the information so that someone can understand it. So we're seeing the differences in how we show the information. I jumped too quickly. We're showing the differences in how we perceive that content. I'll show you a few more, then we'll jump over to the last bits. And I want to make sure you have the slides that you can download. So you can see how changing that visual significantly changes how people perceive that content. This is very, very different than the previous graphics. So again, when it comes to rendering, you can build it or you can buy it. My recommendation is you use a hybrid of the two. If you want to use a graphic designer, make sure that